Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a
Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani. First, let's take a look at the latest stories making headlines this hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin is receiving constant updates on the situation in the Belgorod region from his local governor. Moscow says Russia's priority in its border region is to help residents and support those who need temporary relocation. Anti-Kremlin group releases drone video to show Russian military equipment being destroyed in Russia's Belgorod region. Pope Francis accepts resignation of Indian Bishop Franco Mulakal, who was Bishop of Jalandhar in northern India, was acquitted last year of repeatedly raping a nun over a period of 2 years. And Eurozone inflation falls to the lowest level since Russia invaded Ukraine. Rate of inflation for the month of May recorded at 6.1%. But ECB President Christine Lagarde signals more interest rate rises ahead. All right, let's start you off with the presidential race here in the United States. Next year's election will mark America's 60th presidential contest. President Joe Biden, a Democrat, is seeking re-election as of now and launched his campaign last month. But the question which still remains unanswered is who will be the Republican candidate to challenge the incumbent president for the White House race if Biden does become the nominee. Donald Trump is the clear frontrunner in an increasingly crowded field seeking the Republican presidential nomination. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis also launched his bid for the hot seat as the race for the White House heats up. Former Vice President Mike Pence plans to announce his candidacy next week. Pence will officially launch his widely expected campaign in Iowa. A staunch conservative from Indiana, Pence is an ardent opponent of abortion. He has been crisscrossing the country in recent months, speaking in many of the states seen as the most consequential in the Republican nomination race. Pence will also try to embrace that the former President Trump and come out of his shadow after years of unwavering loyalty. The former vice president has recently been at loggerheads with Trump. He refused to go along with Trump's efforts to allegedly overturn the 2020 election results and remain in power. Pence said recently in March that history would hold Trump accountable for his role in the Capitol riots. Pence added Trump was wrong and said, quote, "I had no right to overturn the election." In April, he even testified in the federal investigation that was examining Trump's role in the assault on the Capitol, one among the many legal cases which the former president is currently facing. And it's not just Mike Pence who is expected to launch his bid for the White House. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is also expected to join the race next week. Meanwhile, despite a rocky start, Ron DeSantis' campaign, where his online interaction on Twitter Spaces overshadowed and crashed several times, DeSantis is preparing himself for an 18-month campaign against his one-time cheerleader, Donald Trump. The 44-year-old is offering Republicans a version of Trumpism without the so-called chaos or without Trump. Often compared with the twice-impeached former president, the Florida governor may or may not be a credible alternative to Trump, depending on who you ask. However, he still lacks Trump's national profile. DeSantis, along with other Republican candidates, faced the daunting task of closing an enormous polling gap, with Trump leading close to 50 percentage points. So which candidate will be able to catch up to the former president, if any, as the race for the White House is officially on? Well, for more on this, we are being joined by Orlando Sanchez from the great state of Texas. Orlando is a GOP strategist. Welcome to WION, and thank you so much for joining us. Well, the Republican pool is getting pretty crowded. However, former President Donald Trump seems to be the front runner, and everyone is expecting Ron DeSantis to be a second runner-up. However, judging from past primaries, are we at a point where we know the results as of now?
I think as of today, it would be safe to predict that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024.
And do you think that while Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, there's this concern, even among Republicans, that he may not be able to win the hearts and minds of the general public and win a general election, notably among independents?
Well, that's a distinct possibility. Of course, we're well over a year, almost and a half before the presidential general election. A lot can happen. Most voters, and certainly most middle of the road sort of mainstream voter, will be looking at the economy. So they're used to and have experienced the Trump administration where inflation was stable, interest rates were not rising, oil and gas production in the United States was sufficient to drive the cost of fossil fuels down. Americans were paying $1.69 a gallon for fuel versus $3.49 today. Inflation is out of control. So I've always said that the one question, if Donald Trump is the nominee, needs to ask President Biden in a debate is the same question Ronald Reagan asked Jimmy Carter. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And most Americans will say financially, they're worse off.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. In your opinion, where does Joe Biden stand and where do the Democrats stand? It seems that they actually prefer Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee because for one reason or the other, maybe looking back at just 2022, the midterms, they think that Trump is, quote unquote, the beatable Republican candidate. Is that the case?
Well, certainly they're stuck with Joe Biden. They nominated Joe Biden in 2020, assuming that he would be sort of a leveling effect after 4 years of Donald Trump's chaos, as you mentioned earlier. But when people look at the policies of Donald Trump, despite what he says, despite his rhetoric and his inflammatory debate, most people understand that inflation was in good shape, interest rates were in good shape, the cost of living was in good shape, there was relative stability in the country, immigration was checked at the border. And so people are going to compare. We've seen the chaos of Biden, even though he's not as vociferous, so to speak, and bombastic. But people are going to want to prefer the security that Donald Trump offered. That is, fuel stability, price stability at the grocery store. This ridiculous policy that Biden has implemented that if you have a good credit rating when you purchase a home, you're going to have to contribute to those that have less credit. People just don't like that lurch towards socialism. So I think it's going to be a stark comparison between the chaos of Joe Biden and the chaos of rhetoric of Trump, but the basic stability of the economic situation domestically.
Yeah, and hopefully the rest of the country will try to understand the average Trump voter, which is a very loyal base to the former president. I mean, they absolutely love him. Orlando Sanchez, thank you so much for joining us on WION, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Delighted.
An audio recording from the summer of 2021 may debunk former U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that he declassified all the top secrets held at Mar-a-Lago. According to CNN, the federal prosecutors have obtained a recording of Trump discussing the classified documents he kept at his private residence. The audio recording is from a meeting at his golf club in New Jersey, in which the former president admitted that he kept a classified Pentagon document detailing a potential attack against Iran. The recording also captured a discussion during which Trump was reacting to the publication of a story in The New Yorker regarding how Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, took action to ensure the outgoing president issued no illegal orders. According to that article, General Milley was concerned that Trump might set in motion a full-scale conflict that was not justified by ordering military action against Iran. CNN reported that the audio recording contains the sound of paper rustling, and one source said that it seems that as if the document was right in front of the former president during the meeting. Donald Trump has vehemently denied that he shared classified documents with anyone after exiting the White House. The July 2021 meeting took place long before Trump's aides sent 15 boxes of records from his Palm Beach residence to the National Archives. The Justice Department is currently probing Trump's alleged unlawful retention of national defense information and is currently being overseen by a special prosecutor named Jack Smith. Smith has reportedly obtained another evidence which shows that Donald Trump made efforts to obstruct the investigation by concealing the documents from the government as well.
The case you are about to hear against this accused. Criminal responsibility before this court is these people. They were not enemies of the state of Kosovo.
In the U.S. House of Representatives, a critical battle has been won. A bill to suspend the massive $31.4 trillion debt ceiling has passed the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. The deeply divided House voted 314 to 117 to clear the bill late last night. The bill has temporarily suspended the debt ceiling until January 2025. This gives lawmakers breathing room to address the pressing issue after the 2024 presidential election. But it's not just about borrowing limits. The bill also includes spending caps, energy project permits, work requirements for food aid programs and the clawback of unused COVID-19 funds. It was not an easy decision for both the parties in the lower house of the Congress. Lawmakers from both parties had to set aside their differences, balance their competing priorities, ultimately to let this bill pass the House.
Tonight, we all made history because this is the biggest cut and savings this Congress has ever voted for. And it's not that we're just voting for it. This is going to be law. $2.1 trillion. Because of the vote we took tonight, the largest rescissions in American history. All the COVID money, the billions of dollars sitting out there that they said they would never bring back. You know what? To the taxpayer, to you hard-working Americans, we stood for you. We brought that money back.
This is extortion, but we have to deal with it. It's for the benefit of our country and the world's economy.
U.S. President Joe Biden hailed the passage of the bill as a, quote, critical step to prevent a devastating default. He said, quote, tonight the House took a critical step forward to prevent a first ever default and protect our country's hard-earned and historic economic recovery. Now the bill goes to the Senate, which has a slim Democratic majority. The U.S. Senate must vote on the bill later this week before President Biden can sign it into law. The government is forecast to hit its borrowing limit on June 5th, so time is of essence.
So, Mr. Bennett, make good on our promise.
The Biden administration is preparing to sign a deal that would allow U.S.-based General Electric to produce engines for military aircraft on Indian soil. A deal finalizing the joint production is expected to be inked and announced by the time Biden hosts India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi for an official state visit on June 22nd. The White House said in January that it had received the application to jointly produce the engines in India. Amid China's territorial ambitions, Washington is working to deepen ties with the world's largest democracy and seize deeper military-to-military and technological ties. India, the world's largest arms importer, depends on Russia for nearly half of its military supplies. Over the decades, India has bought Russian fighter jets, tanks, nuclear submarines, and an aircraft carrier. India's state-owned Hindustan Aeronautics Limited had previously said it planned to use GE-manufactured 414 engine on Tejas light combat aircrafts. As per Reuters news agency, the deal is not finalized and also requires the notification to the U.S. Congress. Washington has maintained strict control over what domestic military technology can be shared or sold to other countries. A broader joint partnership between the United States and India announced earlier this year is designed to encourage firms to collaborate especially on military equipment and tech. GE has offered some transfer of technology to the HAL, which will produce the engines as a licensed manufacturer. However, India is reportedly pushing for more technology to be shared. While India can manufacture jet domestically, it is keen to get to know how to make aircraft engines. State-owned Hindustan Aeronautics Limited is using a lighter GE engine for the 83 light combat aircraft it is manufacturing for the Indian Air Force. India intends to produce more than 350 fighter jets for its Air Force and Navy over the next 2 decades, which could be powered by the GE 414. Well, Sweden is set to become the first European country to declare itself smoke-free, as there are less than 5% daily smokers in the Swedish population. Experts have accredited the success to the decade of anti-smoking campaigns that have been going on and legislation in Sweden as well. While some think the credit goes to a smokeless tobacco product called snus. This product is banned everywhere in the European Union, but in Sweden, it is available as an alternative to cigarettes. The Public Health Agency in Sweden says the smoking rate has continued to fall. Only 6.4% of Swedes over the age of 18 were daily smokers back in 2019. This is far below the average of 18.5% across the two-nation bloc. Meanwhile, Canada becomes the first country in the world to print health warnings directly on every individual cigarette. The move is a part of packaging and labeling regulations as part of the Canadian government efforts to help adults and the younger generation, quit smoking. The regulation also comes as Canada aims to drop its nationwide tobacco use to less than 5% by 2035. The new rules will go into effect from August 1st, and it will be implemented in different phases. From the ugly ducklings of the fashion industry to a Cinderella story for investors, Crocs had come a long way since it jumped onto the scene. This next report records the gripping rise of what some call the fashion-forward shoe brand. Take a look.
Every first-time investor jumps into the stock market hoping for a Cinderella story. Their first stock is most likely Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon or Meta. But there's another stock that's been making a splash. The Crocs star. Crocs jumped onto the mainstream as a boating and outdoor shoe brand. But their funky designs and unbeatable comfort made them a top pick on Wall Street. The company made a successful IPO in 2006 and raked in $208 million. And its ascent to the top has been gripping ever since. If you had invested $100 5 years back, you would be walking away with $760. Apple made some sweet gains during the same time, but not enough to give Crocs the slip. Over the years, Crocs has launched several collection lines that have sold out within minutes. And its efforts to woo streetwear enthusiasts has got Wall Street's attention. But can the stock continue its dream run, especially as more people head to offices and cut down on discretionary spending? Well, investors are not worried. They think Crocs are totally worth the market value they command. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
Well, we've all seen flying cars in movies, but something similar happened in real life in Valdoceta region of Georgia, where a distracted driver hit a tow truck, ramp, and hurled through the air. The driver, a 21-year-old woman from Tallahassee, Florida, survived the crash, but reportedly sustained serious injuries. Here's more.
Good. I threw down 1050 roll over. Last and second EMS immediate roll. Previous 1050, 84 west.
Singer Sia has announced that she is on the autism spectrum 2 years after she drew criticism from her depiction of the condition in the film Music. The Australian pop star and filmmaker shared her experience publicly for the first time on a podcast. She said, and this is a quote, "I feel like for 45 years I was like, I've got to go put on my human suit on," end of quote. The revelation comes as a surprise for many since she had come under fire over her directorial debut, Music. The movie explored the life of a woman who becomes the sole caregiver for her half-sister, a teenager with nonverbal autism. It courted a lot of controversy over the clumsy portrayal of autism. She was also criticized for casting a neurotypical actor, Maddie Ziegler, as the main character. At the time of the controversy, Sia had hit back critics saying the story was inspired by her neuroatypical friend. However, the Australian singer did not allude to being neuroatypical herself. But on the podcast, she finally revealed that she was indeed on the spectrum. Thank you so much for staying with us and watching WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani, but don't go away. A lot more news and headlines coming up only on WION World is One.
tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.
From the second launch pad at Satish Dhawan Space Center, today's launch will be the fourth launch of ISRO this year. 2, 1, 0.
As we speak from the second launch pad of Satish Dhawan Space Center, this is a vehicle that's carrying NVS-01, a second generation navigation satellite of India. This is a satellite